طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Continuing along with the book تعظيم العلم, we've reached the 5th chapter, المعقد الخامس سلوك الجادة الموصولة إليه. So basically the path of seriousness and striving to reach knowledge. قال المؤلف رحمه الله لكل مطلوب طريق يوصل إليه فمن سلك جادة مطلوبه أوقفته عليه ومن عدل عنها لم يظفر بمطلوبه. He said that for every desire or goal there's a path that leads to it, right? And whoever seeks the path with seriousness and striving and continuity, not giving up, he will be basically reaching his goal, achieving his goal, being connected to the goal. And whoever turns away from the path, he won't be successful in achieving it, right? So you have a goal, and there's a path to get to that goal. If you take that path and you're serious and you stick to the path and you strive and do everything you need to get to that goal, you'll make it, right? But if you go off the path, you're going to miss the goal. You're going to miss the mark and you won't reach it. وَإِنَّ لِلْعِلْمِ طَرِيقًا مِنْ أَخْطَأَهَا ضَلَّ وَلَمْ يَنِلْ الْمَقْصُودِ وَرُبَّمَا أَصَابَ فَائِدَةً قَلِيلَةً مَعْ تَعَبٍ كَثِيرٍ. And he said, for knowledge, there is a path, a straight way to achieve knowledge. And whoever goes off this path has been going astray, right? Or he will never reach the goal of knowledge. Or if you deviate from the path of knowledge, the correct way to get to the knowledge that the scholars have made for us, that the Prophet ﷺ has taught the Sahaba and those after him, if you go away from the correct path, he said you might get some knowledge, but it's going to cost you a lot of tiredness and struggling and loss of time. Whereas if you stuck to the right path, you'd reach your goal a lot quicker and you'd gain a lot more beneficial knowledge. وقد ذكر هذا الطريق بلفظ جامع مانع محمد مرتضى بن محمد الزبيدي رحمه الله صاحب تاج العروس في منظومة له تسمى ألفية السند أو ألفية السند. يقول فيها فما حوى الغاية في 1000 سنة شخص فخذ من كل فن أحسنه بحفظ متن جامع للراجح تأخذه على مفيد ناصح. So this poet, scholar, he made a poem kind of describing the way to get the correct knowledge. And he said that you cannot, attain if you want to attain your goal, like not spending thousands of years trying to achieve it, then you should take from all the knowledge the most complete and the best of it, right? By memorizing a text that kind of summarizes for you that chapter of knowledge, right? This is the manhaj of the scholars before us. There's certain texts and there's certain books and there's certain poems that they have in every field of knowledge that have been passed down for hundreds and hundreds of years, from scholar to scholar, from scholar to student, from student to student, right? And these texts are the best of the best for you. So instead of going and trying to make your own ijtihad and try to find a new way to seek knowledge, you stick to these texts, right? And you memorize from each major field of knowledge a certain text. When you memorize that text, that's like the basis of your foundation of knowledge and you build upon it. فطريق العلم وجادته مبنية على أمرين من أخذ بهما كان معد من العلم لأنه يطلبه من حيث يمكن الوصول إليه. And he said, so the correct path of seeking knowledge, like when you're serious and seeking knowledge, you should build it upon a clear foundation, and that requires two things. If you want to be one who respects knowledge and strives for knowledge and achieves knowledge, you have to build it upon two things to reach that. فأما الأمر الأول فحفظ متن جامع للراجح فلا بد من حفظ ومن ظن أنه ينال العلم بلا حفظ فإنه يطلب محالا. He said, for the first part is by memorizing a complete, concise text, in that field of knowledge that you're seeking, right? The text that's rajih, the qawl al-rajih. So you take the most authentic, narration, the most authentic text in the field that you're studying, and you memorize it. And he said, and it's required to have memorization. لَبُدَّ مِنَ الْحِفْظِ. Whoever thinks they can reach knowledge without memorizing is trying to achieve the impossible. بَلْ هِيَ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. They are clear ayats in the chest, in the hearts of those who have knowledge. So Allah describes the knowledgeable ones as those that have memorized, that understand, that comprehend in their minds and in their hearts. That's true knowledge. If you have 1,000 books, you've read 1,000 books, but you don't memorize anything from them, you can't recall anything from them, you can't teach anything from them, right? That's not real knowledge. Real knowledge means hifth. You memorize the principles. You can go and give proofs to somebody. You can go and quote to somebody. If your books are taken away, you can still teach. That's real ilm. If you don't have hifth, your knowledge is deficient, right? والمحفوظ المعول عليه هو متن الجامع للراجح أي المعتمد عند أهل الفن. And the mahfuz, the thing that you're supposed to memorize, is the text that's agreed upon by the scholars of that specialty, right? So when you're seeking knowledge, every fan, every subject, every category has a text that's agreed upon amongst the scholars, right? So if you're studying fiqh, for example, whichever madhab it may be, there's a text that's a basis for that madhab. And the scholars encourage one to memorize that, to understand it completely. It's the most basic of the text, right? And then they have a secondary stage where they get a little bit more advanced. So the first one, it quotes to you the qawl al-rajih, the correct opinion according to that madhab, right? Just one qawl. You don't want to take on too much stuff that you cannot bear. So you understand what's the right opinion in this question, in this book. So one qawl, one madhab, you understand, you memorize, you complete that text. Then the scholars usually in the fiqh, they go to a secondary book which might mention the differences within the madhab, right? And then, maybe 1 to 2 sayings in the madhab. Then they go to a third level where they will mention maybe more differences in the madhab and the different opinions and the different proofs for each and what's the strongest opinion. And then in the fourth level, they do the comparative fiqh, which is the different madhab, right? Mentioning all their sayings, all their proofs, and who is the strongest of opinions. But the way you build yourself up is you start with that small text first, understand it, master it, and then move on. This is how you build real ilm. In hadith, the same thing. Everybody says, the scholars, they have a path. You start with the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi, right? You memorize them, you understand them, because that's usul al-din, that's the most important thing, right? And then you can go to hadith al-ahkam, either umdat al-ahkam or bulugh al-maram. Or when you finish those, then you can go into the kutub al-sitta, like Bukhari, Muslim, etc. But you always start with a small text, memorize it, understand it, and master it, right? Mustalah hadith, they have the same principle. Usul al-fiqh, the same principle, right? This is how you become a knowledgeable person, by taking these small texts, mastering them, and building upon them. Once you memorize a small text, it's easy for you to build upon that. Like okay, these are the arkan of salat. I memorized them. I know this is the salat. This is the sunan of salat. This is the, what if I miss a rukn of the salat, what happens? What if I miss the sunan of salat, what happens? Then you build upon it, right? Same thing with all the fara'id. Then you go into the ahkam that you need, for example, for marriage or for business or anything that you're dealing with. And then you go later on and you can expand your knowledge. But at least you have that basic understanding that you can take with you wherever you go. وأما أمر الثاني فأخذوه على مفيد ناصح فتفزع إليه شيخ تفهم عنه معاينة يتصف بهذين الوصفين. He said the second requirement for gaining beneficial knowledge in terms of following the correct path, the right path, and seeking knowledge and being serious about it, besides memorizing text, is picking the right teacher, the right sheikh, right? And he says that the sheikh should have certain qualities for you to benefit from them. وأولها الإفادة وهي الأهلية في العلم فيكون ممن عرف بطلب العلم وتلقيه حتى أدرك فصارت له ملكة قوية فيها. So the first point that you want to look for and the quality of the shaykh or the teacher is that he has the capability of teaching, and he has the qualifications to teach. He has reached the level in seeking of knowledge that he's proficient in that knowledge and he's able to teach it to others. That's the first point you want to see in the scholar, in the shaykh. والأصل في هذا ما أخرجه أبو داود في سننه بإسناد قوي عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال تسمعون ويسمع منكم ويسمع ممن يسمع منكم. He said that you will hear, meaning you hear from me to the Sahaba, and those will come after and hear from you, right? That which you have heard from me. Meaning that there's like a sanad, a kind of sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ has instituted for us. The teacher, he teaches the students till they become teachers themselves and teach to others. And it goes down from generation to generation, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ up to our time now. Alhamdulillah, Allah Azza wa Jal has preserved this deen. We have the Quran that I can recite from my teacher, who can recite from his teacher, who can go all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. And we have ahadith, the same thing. We have people, students of knowledge, that have books that they have taken from their teacher that goes back all the way to the author of that book. We are a deen of sanad, alhamdulillah. We have a chain of narration that goes back to our teachers and goes back to our prophets. All the books of hadith, all the books of fiqh, we have a sanad for them, right? And this is the blessing that Allah has preserved this ummah with. So first and foremost, when you're picking the scholar, is that he should be qualified and he has his sanad and he has his capabilities and qualifications. He's known to be one who sought knowledge and sat with the other scholars and is proficient in teaching. والعبرة بعموم الخطاب لا بخصوص المخاطب فلا يزال من معلم العلم في هذه الأمة أن يأخذ الخالف عن السلف. And he's saying this hadith is not specifically only for the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ, but it's for all times to come. Basically, that sanad of teaching from the teacher to the student. The student becomes a teacher himself and teaches to another student. That student becomes a teacher himself, and on and on. He said this is the way that the Salaf have passed down to the Khalaf, right? And it's a continuous, inshallah, until the Day of Judgment. It will continue like that until Allah, He takes away all the knowledge from the earth, and then the Day of Judgment will come. But until that time, the Prophet ﷺ said there will always be a group of people that are clearly upon the truth, right? Calling to the truth and fighting and striving for the truth, and these are the people of knowledge. أما الوصف الثاني فهو النصيحة وتجمع معنيين اثنين. And the second requirement from the shaykh or from the teacher, that he should have sincerity and sincere advice for his student, and concern for his student, and caring for his student. And this is achieved with two affairs, he says. أحدهما صلاحية الشيخ للاقتداء به والاهتداء بهديه ودله وسمته. This is achieved by the shaykh having the good character that you can be guided with, that you can take as an example from. When you sit with the scholars, you take from them their character as well. That's sometimes even more important than the knowledge. You'll find some of the narrations of the Salaf that they learned knowledge for for like 10 years and knowledge for 20 years. And they will say, I wish I learned the adab for 20 years and the knowledge for 10 years. Because the adab and the khuluq of the shaykh is even sometimes more important than knowledge itself. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتِمَّ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. That verily I was only sent to complete or perfect the character, the good adab, right? And this is the qualities that we try to seek from our teachers, to learn the proper manners and the proper interaction, and having that kindness to others and gentleness and good, manners to others, right? This is the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is the sunnah that we should be learning. So this is one of the characteristics you can seek for in the shaykh, right? For him to be of those who are giving proper nasiha. والآخر معرفته بطرائق التعلم أو تعليم بحيث يحسن تعليم المتعلم ويعرف ما يصلح له وما يضره وفق التربية العلمية التي ذكرها الشاطبي في الموافقات. And he said that the second point for this shaykh to be of good nasiha, good character, good advice, is for that shaykh to have the capability to know what to teach the student, right? How to teach a student properly. Each student is different. So a true scholar, a true shaykh, a true teacher will individualize and know what that student needs and address his needs. For example, some students aren't capable to take too much knowledge. They can only take a little bit. Some students, they might have problems at home, and the shaykh, he takes time to go and give him advice to help that student. Some students, they might be falling down in their iman. So the Shaykh sees this and he tries to lift the student up in iman. So he encourages them to seek knowledge. Right? Bashiru wa la tanaffiru. The Prophet ﷺ said, give the good tidings, don't scare people away. And this is the true Shaykh, the true scholar. He has this capability of giving proper nasiha and knowing what the student needs. And this is what Imam al-Shatibi in his Muwafaqat, he's written like some chapters about husn tarbiyah, the way to raise people correctly. You know, as we raise our children at home, the Shaykh raise us as students as well, to become teachers in the future, right? To teach us the good character, the good manners, how to interact with each other, you know, to know what the student is deficient in so you can help him come up, you know, to know what the student is proficient in so you can encourage him and help him to teach others, right? This is what a true scholar, a true Shaykh, he realizes, and he builds the generations to come. You know, if you see the great scholars, one of the signs, you know, not necessarily it's always the case, but in general, sometimes they build students to take their place when they're gone, right? They leave a mark, you know, they'll have that influence upon a certain amount of students that they can change the world with, you know. If you look in the past 50 to 100 years, you'll find the name of some of the great scholars, like very few, right? But their influence was great. Like they brought Sunnah back to many places in the world that were away from the Sunnah. You know, women that weren't even wearing hijab before started wearing hijab. Men that would never even think about growing the beards started growing the beards again, right? The thing of sahih and da'if started becoming an issue. You know, before people would say whatever they want. But because of certain scholars and certain, you know, their dawah and their upbringing and their influence upon societies, they revived the ummah, you know. And that's what we as Muslims should strive to be. You know, the Prophets, they didn't leave behind dirham wala dinar, right? They didn't leave back monetary wealth for us, but they left ilm. And that's the greatest of inheritance. That's the inheritance of the Prophets. You know, that's the one that you can save yourself, your family, and the world from evil with. You know, so in this chapter, basically, the main point is you stick to the path that the scholars have derived for us to reach the goal of seeking knowledge. Right? It's not reinventing the wheel. You don't have to come and make ijtihad and try to find a whole new methodology of seeking knowledge. It's been passed down to us from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until now. Right? You want to stick to the authentic texts that the scholars have agreed upon and try to memorize them and build upon them. Last week we discussed the most important of all knowledge is the Quran and the Sunnah, right? And you want to make that your asas, your foundation for all knowledge, because all knowledge is coming from that. And even like Ibn Abbas and others said that the Quran itself has everything we need. It's just the capability of the people is deficient. The true scholars, they can derive from it everything that they need because it's so deep and so rich, and it's the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, that's why certain scholars, they were in prison and all they had was the Quran, and they came up with such like beautiful works of fiqh and tawheed and hadith and all types of like works from the prison with just the book of Allah in their mind, right? Because they had a deep spiritual connection to the book of Allah. So that's the foundation of knowledge. And then after that, the Shaykh is saying to go to pick the authentic texts that the scholars have put forth for us in every field that we need, right? And you start with the most important and you go from there. So the most important is understanding your creed, you know, your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and tawheed, right? And then the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like we said, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi as Usul al-Din. All the main principles of the deen are in those 42 hadith that Imam Nawawi has written, right? And then fiqh, you have to know your basic ahkam of fiqh. So pick a metin in whichever madhab you think is appropriate, you know, that you might have in your countries, for example, or the society that you live in is prolific. Pick that and study it and master it, right? And then we can build upon it, inshallah. We'll get into details in the future, but just so you have that basic understanding. And the second point after getting the text is to pick the shaykh, to pick a proper teacher that can teach you correctly, that has sat with other scholars, that has spent time seeking knowledge, that is known to have understand the issues and has the capability to deliver the message, right? This is the goal that you want to find. And he also has the characteristic of knowing his students and knowing what they need, knowing their deficiencies to lift them up, knowing what they're proficient in to encourage them. Right? This is the summary of today's chapter, alhamdulillah. So if there's any questions or comments, tafaddalu. So, okay, there's in seeking knowledge, you have what you call the layman or the lay person and a student of knowledge. So the layperson that doesn't really want to spend the time in seeking knowledge, doesn't, for example, he works full time, he just wants to know what I have to do. So he'll go to his local imam or sheikh or whatever is like the biggest scholar he thinks that he can reach in his society or in his city, and ask him questions. I want to do such and such. Is it okay? Is it halal, haram? I want to pray correctly. How do I pray? And he just asks. He doesn't really know the details. That's, okay to a sense if you want to be in that level. But as a Muslim, you should strive to reach higher levels. So then you go to student of knowledge category, right? And a student of knowledge, the scholars recommend to pick any madhab. It doesn't really necessarily matter. I mean, like if you live in a country where the madhab is a certain madhab, like you were saying, then obviously you'd pick that madhab. But if we're in this society where there's no really dominant madhab, then you can pick what you think is most useful. The main point behind the studying of a madhab is to learn what's called malakat al-fiqh, like having the ability to derive the rulings of fiqh and understand why the ahkam is as it is. So you can read books of hadith, but it won't give you that capability, that understanding. Like you don't know, for example, there's 3 categories of water. What constitutes water that is tahir or a najis or tuhur, right? It's just broken down like in the hadith, but it doesn't clarify that. Or how does it make the water najis exactly, right? The hadiths give you generalities sometimes, but not specifics, whereas the fiqh, the ulama, the scholars of the salaf, they went and analyzed the hadith and broke it down to show you, like, for example, in salat, some things are arkan, pillars. If you leave them intentionally, your salat is invalid, right? And some things are wajibat. If you leave them non-intentionally, you can make sujood sahwi and your salat is still correct. Why did they pick these and what determined that? That's where the fiqh comes into, right? So you read the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ prayed as such, right? But it doesn't specifically tell you, what is the arkan and what is the wajibat and what is the sunan. That's from the fiqh.
So do you take from all 4 of them?
No, I mean, so the easy way to pick one of them, one madhab, you start with, whatever you think.
I haven't set the fiqh of sunnah or yourself one.
No, you follow, I mean, you take the good from any of them, obviously the truth, wherever the truth is the most, you take. But in order to build yourself up as a student of knowledge, you stick with one until you expand it, Like if a person doesn't know the basics of what's like the wajibat of wudu, what makes your wudu correct, and you ask him, and he says, I don't know, and he doesn't know the wajibat or the arkan of salat, or the arkan of zakat, and these type of issues, he doesn't really have knowledge, like he can't build upon it, he has nothing to build upon. So the madhab makes it like easy for you, because basically you have the likes of Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmed, who have reached such high level in understanding of hadith and fiqh in the Arabic language, and their sayings have been worked upon by hundreds of scholars, for hundreds of years. So they make the path easy for you to get like a basic understanding of the deen, of the evidences of the sharia and how to implement and derive rulings from them. So the point of the madhab is not, your goal is to follow the Quran and the Sunnah, but the point of madhab is to make it easier for you to get to the understanding. So you learn the madhab to derive the rulings of fiqh and you build your knowledge up. If you study all 4 madhabs at the same time, I mean, unless you have like a photographic memory and you're like, mashallah, Ibn Taymiyyah of the times, then alhamdulillah, that's great. But most of us, it's difficult. So they make it easy for us, like just start with a really small matan, understand it, memorize it, then build upon it. Then when you've gone to like the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th categories, then you can start going to all the different madhabs and seeing like the tarjih and stuff like that. There's been an extreme in the sense that people say that, following a madhab is bid'ah, right? But if you look at the seerah of the greatest of scholars, they all pretty much followed the madhab. Ibn Taymiyyah al-Hanbali, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, Ibn Abdul Barr al-Maliki, all the great scholars they find, because it was basically they're not having to reinvent the wheel. So it's just a path for us to learn to get a stronger understanding of the deen and build our knowledge. If you want to just be like a lay person and not really worry about it and not spend the time to study, then that's fine. You can follow whatever book is available, whatever sheikh you want to ask. But if you want to really build yourself and build your knowledge, then this is the methodology that the scholars have taught us. And the reason that we suffer today so much in terms of lack of knowledge is, in addition to the unfortunate bombardment of information that we get from everything, like in terms of the news and social media and the telephone, like everybody in our contact list has like 400 or 500 people have access to call you anytime they want or message you, and you're just like constantly distracted. Besides that, the methodology is where the mistake has been made. In the past, the scholars would sit for 6 to 7 years and master almost all the sciences of Islam in knowledge and have the capability to teach. Nowadays, people, they go in Islamic studies from high school through college to master's degree to PhD in a very specific field, but they don't have really any deep knowledge. So they might spend 12, 15, 20 years studying, but they're not following the methodology that the scholars have sent forward to us. So as the Shaykh said, they spend so much time and effort and tiredness to get such little amount of knowledge. Whereas if you had followed the correct path that the scholars have put for us, it would take a lot less time and you get a lot more beneficial knowledge. I mean, following and implementing is different from seeking the knowledge itself. So because your country follows that particular madhab, it just makes more sense to learn the fiqh through that madhab. Your goal right now is to build your foundational knowledge, so you have the capabilities to go and look into deeper knowledge afterwards. So it doesn't, like I said, really matter which of the madhab that you pick, but if you're going to deal with those people and live in their society or have more interaction with them, it might be more wise to take that madhab, so you know why they do the fiqh that they do, what their rulings are based upon. You have a deeper understanding. And at the same time, you're building your own fiqh. You're going to try to get to higher levels. The same thing, like, for example, Omar is from Turkey, so the Hanafi madhab would be most appropriate in a sense to understand that.
But everything is different, the way they pray.
Yeah, it's different, but it's just, but the but what you'll learn and what you'll gain is a deeper understanding of fiqh in general. So you'll know, like, why did they pray like that? Where did they get the rulings from? And it's not just like, subhanAllah, like sometimes we'll say that, oh, they had no hadith, so they didn't know better, so they just did this. A lot of times they actually have the hadith, it's just they understand it in a different formation, or they have other hadith that explain it in a different way. Most of the madhab, when you go back and study it, they have like clear evidences. Like, it's just funny how some people, they think that like they haven't learned Arabic language at all. They never studied usul al-fiqh or fiqh or qawaid al-fiqhiyya or maqasid al-sharia, all these type of knowledge that the scholars have, and they go and they pick up Bukhari and start giving fatwas. They don't know this hadith has been abrogated. They don't know that this hadith, there's another hadith that explains it more. So that's the danger of like the modern times and people, they're not following the methodology of the Salaf on how they taught us. The Salaf were very keen and very careful not to, speak without knowledge, and they were very keen to teach us the proper way to gain that knowledge. It's not like in reinventing the wheel. And the respect of knowledge we're studying here, inshallah, one of our goals to understand this book, as the Imam or the scholar has written this book for that purpose, to gain a respect of knowledge and appreciation of knowledge, is learning how to attain it the correct way, right? So this is the point of this chapter, actually. The four main madhab, madhab al-Hanafi and Maliki and Shafi'i and Hanbali, they don't differ too much on the usul. The three, Maliki onto Ahmed ibn Hanbal, they have like kind of more agreement than the Hanafis. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he was in like the Iraq district, right? And at that time there was a lot of people spreading fabricated ahadith. So some people think he was like not knowledgeable about hadith, but he was very knowledgeable. It's just he was very keen, he had very high standards to accept the hadith, to be careful not to accept a false hadith or weak hadith. So therefore he depended a lot upon analogy, qiyas and ijtihad, using reasoning and ijtihad, right? So that's why you'll find his madhab differs a lot from some of the other three. Imam Malik, he had access to the people of Medina, Amal Ahl Medina. So his understanding is that the Sahaba, there was like over 10,000 Sahaba in Medina, and their children and their grandchildren, they all grew up, around the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, from passing these traditions about the weights and about the monetary actions in the business. So if there wasn't a clear-cut mutawatir hadith, he would take the actions of the people of Medina as an evidence in itself. His reasoning is that it cannot be that thousands upon thousands of Sahaba and their children and their grandchildren will follow or make up something different that the Prophet ﷺ didn't do, right? Imam Shafi'i, he was a student of Imam Malik, so you can see his influence from that. And these are all like the hadith madhabs, because they were dependent mostly upon hadith. But they differ like certain instances, like Imam Ahmed, for example, he takes the weak hadith as evidence if there's nothing else, right? Some take the ijtihad of the Sahaba. If the Sahaba gave a fatwa and there's nothing else from the Quran or Sunnah, they'll take that. So they'll find like minor differences in the usul, but in general they have like pretty much united front. And like I said, it's not, if you're safe with anyone, your main goal is to build your malaka of understanding, like why fiqh comes about. Fiqh itself means understanding, to understand, right? فَقِهَا يَفْقُهُ يعني مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah wants good for, He makes them understand the religion, have knowledge of the religion. That's where fiqh comes from. So your goal is to gain an understanding of the deen, right? And these are just tools to help you in it, make it easy for you. Instead of you having to go and read 100,000 hadith and, master the Arabic language and usul al-fiqh and all these type of things, the scholars have made like an easy path for you. It's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's just, will we take heed or not? That's the question. The right scholars, you try to take advantage of people that are close to you, that you can actually live with in the society. That's, you take advantage of the resources you have first and foremost. A lot of the scholars of the past, they would not travel to other cities or other countries until they benefited from the resources that they have with them, right? So that's the first and foremost. If you can't find any scholar or any teacher or anybody to help you on your path, then you can, if you're able to do so, travel and try to find somebody to meet these characteristics that you look in terms of ilm. He has knowledge. He's sought the path of knowledge for a long time. He has, like, for example, certifications from other scholars saying he's okay to teach what he teaches, how he teaches, his character. These type of characteristics that scholars have put together to see what's a beneficial teacher, right? But always use your resources first and then move on to the others. If you can't travel, you don't have any resources whatsoever, nowadays, alhamdulillah, one of the benefits, I guess, of media is that you can look online to get some of the great scholars that are around the world and benefit from them. There's many lectures online, alhamdulillah, that you can benefit with. And most of these books that I'm talking about, there's explanations for them. So you sit and you get the text, you read it, you memorize it. The benefit of having an actual teacher in front of you is that you can read the text and he can make sure you're understanding it correctly and you're memorizing correctly. That's one of the benefits. Like they said, مَنْ كَانَ شَيْخُهُ كِتَابُهُ كَانَ أَخْطَأُهُ أَكْثَرُ مِنْ ثَوَابُهُ. That whoever's the shaykh is their books, like they don't have a teacher, actual teacher helping them, their mistakes will be more than their correctedness, right? Because when you just read by yourself, you don't have any interaction with others. You might read something and think it's right and it's wrong. That's what the shaykh is there for, to explain to you, this author was, mistaken, or this author might have said such and such in another book that you haven't read, to explain to you, make it easy for you. That's the benefit of having a scholar. He makes the path easy for you. And also the benefit is you learn the adab from him, the proper mannerisms and characteristics. That's one of the great blessings I thank Allah Azza wa Jal for, that being able to sit and see some of the greatest scholars of the world before they passed away, and some that are still alive, alhamdulillah. But just seeing how they teach, how they act, how they interact, how they spend their time, it just like has a great impact upon you, that even some of them that have passed away, it's like you cry because you won't ever be able to see them inshallah in Jannah, but you won't be able to see them again in the dunya. I was telling somebody earlier, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he used to we used to go to the Dawra every time in Ramadan and Hajj. After Shaykh Ibn Baz, it was his main thing that you go and you sit with him and listen to his lectures and see his mannerisms and how he jokes sometimes and how he teaches us. And then even on his deathbed, he was lecturing from the hospital, like we can hear from the loudspeakers in Mecca and the Haram. Before he, even up to the point he was about to pass away, he was teaching. He's suffering from, I think, cancer, but he was still teaching. And then when he died, I realized we won't be able to hear that voice in person anymore. It was just like a blow to your heart. These scholars you should take advantage of before it's too late. So. Yeah. I mean, my goal is to try to, what I'm doing now, inshallah, is to take certain texts that I'm talking about and try to teach them. So whoever helps with me or sits with me, inshallah, like at least I would get this across to them. So I wanted to start with this to appreciate knowledge, to understand, like to seek the knowledge, and then I wanted to go to like, the basic text, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, maybe Umdat al-Ahkam or Umdat al-Fiqh for the fiqh portion, maybe a small book in Aqidah, and then like, if I move away or I pass away, whatever, at least I've gotten that out there from what I've learned, the little that I've learned, inshallah, and benefited, I can try to pass it on. So that was my goal. Like, I pray that you guys, benefit, step up and master it, learn it, and teach it, inshallah.
So you're preparing